Imagine if I told you that a single decision made in an idyllic paradise set off all the suffering and hardship we experience today? Adam and Eve had everything: tranquility, beauty, and immortality. Yet, a single act of defiance altered the fate of mankind forever. In this video, we will uncover the hidden truths of the Garden of Eden. Dive into the overwhelming consequences of this choice and discover how it continues to shape our lives today. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us and ensures you won't miss this world-altering story. When Adam opened his eyes for the very first time, he was greeted by a breathtaking beauty, an experience no other human would ever know. The air was untainted, filled with the fragrance of the most brilliant flowers, and around him, every living being thrived in perfect balance. This was the Garden of Eden, a realm where peace was absolute, where pain, fear, and death had no place. And when the Creator knelt before the dust of the earth, something extraordinary unfolded. Not only did he mold Adam's body with divine craftsmanship, but he also did something no other creature had ever known. He breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life, and in that moment, the lifeless clay became living flesh. The inanimate turned into a soul. As Adam opened his eyes, he was not just another creature, but the very embodiment of God. This breath, filled with mystery and power, transformed Adam into more than a mere living being. He became an extension of the Creator himself on earth. In his eyes reflected eternity, and in his heart pulsed the perfect love that gave birth to everything. Adam's distinctiveness lay not only in his outward form but in his very essence. Created in the image of the divine, he stood alone among all creatures, carrying within him the imprint of the Creator. He was a being capable of thought, feeling, and choice just as his God was. With the breath of life, Adam became the bridge between heaven and earth, the living manifestation of God's will. His being held the promise of a humanity that would reflect God's glory in every thought, gesture, and decision. The responsibility he bore was monumental, yet so was the honor of being the first, the dawn of human history. Amid the towering trees and crystal-clear rivers, Adam received a sacred charge: to cultivate and guard the garden. He was not a mere observer, but the caretaker and protector of an unparalleled world. Every plant that blossomed and every fruit that ripened was under his watchful care. His hands, shaped by the very Creator, now worked the earth, continuing the divine labor. As he toiled, Adam found joy in watching creation flourish under his vigilant gaze. But it wasn't only the plants that were under his dominion. The Creator brought to him every creature on the earth, from the mighty lion to the smallest insect. With the wisdom granted by God, Adam named each one, forging a unique bond with every living being. He became the compassionate ruler, the one entrusted with the power to protect and nurture. And through this, he experienced the freedom of being a co-creator in the world entrusted to him. Eden, in all its magnificence, granted Adam total freedom, but this freedom was not without its purpose. Every task Adam undertook, every creature he named, was a testament to his responsibility and a reflection of his divine nature. The Garden of Eden was not only a breathtaking paradise, but also a stage where Adam's choices would shape the path of his life and the fate of humanity that would follow. In the heart of Eden, where every leaf gleamed under the sun and the sound of flowing water echoed like a gentle melody, Adam began to feel a growing emptiness. He had named all the animals but realized there was no one like him, no one with whom he could share his life. Seeing Adam's loneliness, God decided it was not good for man to be alone. God made Adam fall into a deep sleep, and while he slept, he took a rib from his side and fashioned a new life. When Adam awoke and saw Eve for the first time, his heart surged with joy. She was part of him, the perfect companion he didn't even know he needed. "She is flesh of my flesh," he exclaimed with great happiness. Eve wasn't just a companion, she was his partner, his equal, created to walk beside him. Together, they not only lived in Eden but began the first human relationship, a pure and loving union. Their love for one another was as perfect as the paradise surrounding them. Through Eve's creation, God completed humanity. As Adam and Eve explored the garden, they discovered a tree that stood out above all others. Its fruits were alluring, beautiful, and vibrant, but there was something different about it. This was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, planted by God himself in the very heart of the garden. One day, God called Adam and Eve to him and with both love and seriousness, gave them a clear command: "You may eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." These words weighed heavily on their hearts, but they understood the importance of obedience. The tree, with its tempting fruit, now symbolized more than just a plant. It became a representation of choice and responsibility, a constant reminder of the freedom God had granted them, but also of the consequences tied to their decisions. Eden, which had always been a place of peace and harmony, now bore the presence of a test, one of faith and obedience. Adam and Eve continued to live in the garden, enjoying its splendor and the blessings the Creator had bestowed upon them. Yet the tree remained, a silent test of their trust and loyalty, standing at the center of it all. The mere sight of the forbidden fruit stirred a complex mix of curiosity and fear within them. It reminded them of the heavy responsibility they carried in their choices. Eden continued to thrive around them, yet the untouched fruit symbolized the delicate balance between the blessed life they had known and the unknown destiny that awaited them. Though Eden remained filled with tranquility, something subtle began to shift deep within creation. From among the shadows of the trees, a sly serpent crept towards Eve, its eyes gleaming with malice disguised as innocence. In a soft, coaxing voice, the serpent posed the first question that would forever echo through history. "Did God really say that you can't eat from any tree in the garden?" it asked. Surprised by the creature's audacity, Eve replied, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God has told us not to eat from the tree in the center of the garden, nor to touch it, lest we die." The serpent leaned in closer, its whisper promising temptation. "Surely you won't die. God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." These words planted doubt in Eve's heart. The fruit, which had once been just a symbol of obedience, now seemed to carry an allure she had never considered. The temptation to gain knowledge, to become more, began to consume her thoughts. Eve stared at the fruit, her perception of it shifting entirely. The fruit was beautiful, alluring, and the promise of wisdom was too tempting to resist. Adam, standing beside Eve, felt the same growing tension. He knew what God had commanded, yet the serpent's words sparked a dangerous curiosity within him. Could it be that this fruit offered something more than they had ever imagined? The doubt, subtle yet powerful, began to erode the certainty they once had in the Creator's command. Eden, which had always been a sanctuary of peace, now became the battleground for an internal conflict. The serpent watched eagerly as the seeds of disobedience took root in the hearts of the first humans. What had once been a simple divine instruction now became a moment of choice, weighed down by the looming consequences. The Garden of Eden, once a peaceful haven, was now shrouded in an uncomfortable silence, with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil at its center. Eve reached for the fruit, her hand trembling with hesitation, yet driven by an overwhelming curiosity. What had once symbolized obedience now seemed to pulse with the promise of power and enlightenment. With one last glance at Adam, who stood silently beside her, she made the decision that would alter everything. As she bit into the fruit, a sweet taste filled her mouth, but there was something else, an indescribable sensation. Adam, watching her, saw a mixture of shock and fear in her eyes. He too took the fruit and ate, as though consuming it would answer the unspoken questions now clouding their minds. But instead of answers, they were burdened with a weight unlike anything they had ever known. In that instant, Eden's innocence was lost, and the pure paradise they had once known was replaced by the heavy burden of awareness. For the first time, they became aware of their nakedness. This newfound realization brought a sense of shame they had never experienced before. In a desperate attempt to cover their vulnerability, they used fig leaves, thinking they could conceal their actions from the Creator. The peace that had once filled their hearts was now replaced by an overwhelming sense of guilt. Every sound that had once been comforting now seemed to accuse them. The fruit, which promised wisdom, had instead delivered the harsh truth of their disobedience. The weight of their actions didn't just affect their minds, it settled deeply in their spirits, like a shadow that stretched across the entire garden. They knew that something irreversible had occurred. What had once been a perfect paradise was now a place filled with fear and guilt. The harmony they had enjoyed with God was shattered by the choice they made, and the world they once knew was falling apart. With the memory of the fruit still vivid in their minds, Adam and Eve felt the full weight of their disobedience. What had once seemed to offer power and understanding now left behind the bitter taste of regret. The fig leaves they had chosen to cover themselves were a fragile reminder of their new reality. What had been a life free of fear was now tainted by the instinct to hide and flee from the truth. The leaves could not conceal their vulnerability or the fact that something fundamental had changed. Eden, with all its beauty, now seemed like a place of judgment. Every shadow, every rustling leaf, was a reminder of their transgression. As they adjusted their meager coverings, Adam and Eve felt the enormity of their loss. The trust and freedom they once had were replaced by an unfamiliar, heavy fear. Innocence was lost, and in its place was painful self-awareness. The fig leaves, though they covered their bodies, could not shield them from the undeniable truth. They had strayed from God's perfect plan. As the cool breeze of the afternoon swept through the garden, bringing with it the usual comfort of God's presence, something felt different. Adam and Eve, now cloaked in their fragile fig leaves, felt guilt with every step they took. The sound of God's footsteps, which had once invited them into communion, now seemed like the foreboding sound of judgment. When they heard God's voice, it stirred a deep, paralyzing fear within them. "Adam, where are you?" God's voice echoed through the garden, not in anger but in sorrow. Knowing they could no longer hide, Adam replied with a trembling voice, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. That's why I hid." The Creator, who knew every detail of their actions, asked the question that would expose the full weight of their sin. "Who told you that you were naked? Did you eat from the tree I commanded you not to eat from?" In that moment, what had once been a relationship of trust turned into a cycle of blame and excuses. In an attempt to lessen his own guilt, Adam pointed to Eve. "The woman you gave me as a companion, she gave me the fruit from the tree and I ate," he confessed. God then turned his gaze toward Eve, whose eyes, once filled with joy, were now clouded with unspoken tears. "The serpent deceived me and I ate," she admitted, her voice heavy with shame and regret. What had once been a place of unmatched beauty now became the stage for a judgment that could have been avoided. The Creator, in his justice, could not overlook the sin that had taken place. Yet, amidst the confrontation, there was an undeniable sorrow. The bond that God had shared with his first children, pure and flawless, was now tainted by their disobedience. God pronounced the consequences for each of them: the serpent, the woman, and the man. Every word weighed heavily with the loss they had all experienced. For the serpent, there was an eternal curse. For Eve, the pain of childbirth and a complicated relationship with her husband. And for Adam, the burden of hard labor and the struggle for survival. The garden, which had once been a sanctuary of peace, would now be left behind. With it, the life they had known. The moment of judgment was not just one of condemnation, but also of understanding the consequences of their choices. Adam and Eve, with heavy hearts, realized that the cost of disobedience was separation from the divine presence they had once freely enjoyed. Eden, once their perfect home, now became a distant memory of a time when everything was as it should be. The sentence had been delivered, and the weight of God's words loomed over them like an ominous cloud. The Garden of Eden, their home, was now a forbidden place, a lost paradise they could never return to. With sorrowful hearts and tears in their eyes, Adam and Eve prepared to leave the only world they had ever known. But in his infinite wisdom and justice, God did not cast them out without showing them one final act of mercy. He made garments of skin for them, replacing the fragile fig leaves. Through these garments, the Creator not only covered their physical bodies but also provided protection for the difficult journey ahead. It was a quiet reminder that even though they were banished, Eden was still under God's care. With heavy steps, Adam and Eve left the garden. Each step away from Eden felt harder than the last, as though the weight of guilt and loss made the earth itself resist them. The land, which had once given its fruits so freely, would now demand toil and sweat. Adam could feel in his hands the weight of the labor ahead, while Eve thought of the pain now etched into her reality, the pain of childbirth and motherhood, a new burden she would carry forever. As they looked back one final time, they saw that the path to Eden was blocked by cherubim and a flaming sword, guarding the way to the tree of life. There was no turning back. What had been lost could not be regained. The garden, with all its beauty and perfection, had become nothing more than a painful memory, a distant echo of what could have been. The world they now faced was vast and unfamiliar, filled with challenges, hard work, and suffering, constant companions as a direct consequence of their choices. Yet, even in the midst of their suffering, a tiny spark of hope remained deep within their hearts. They still held on to the memory of the love God had for them. Though life outside of Eden would be hard, lived through sweat and tears, it also marked the beginning of a new journey. A journey where humanity would begin to carve its own path, carrying the lessons learned, the scars of the past, and the hope for a future redeemer beyond the walls of Eden. Adam and Eve found themselves in a world that, at first glance, seemed vast and endless, yet filled with challenges they had never imagined. The land, which had flourished on its own in Eden, now demanded effort and dedication. Adam felt the weight of the stubborn earth in his hands as sweat streamed down his face, struggling to tame the hard, resistant soil. Every seed planted reminded him of the paradise they had lost, and every harvest, though modest, marked the fruit of their hard work. Eve, meanwhile, faced the harsh realities of motherhood in a world now defined by pain. The birth of her children, a moment that should have been filled with pure joy, was overshadowed by the agony of childbirth, a constant reminder of the curse that had become their new reality. Yet, as she cradled her babies in her arms, a new hope began to stir in her heart, a reminder that even outside Eden, life and love could still thrive. Despite everything, the reality of mortality began to assert itself. Time, which in the garden seemed to have no rush, now moved forward relentlessly. Adam and Eve began to notice the first signs of aging, wrinkles on their skin, fatigue in their bodies. But as the years passed and they faced the trials of their new life, they also discovered an unexpected strength they had never known before. Adversity brought with it resilience. They learned how to build, create, care for their families, and find joy in the small victories of daily life. The earth, though stubborn, began to yield to their efforts, and the harvest they reaped from their sweat nourished their families and sustained a new generation. As the years passed, Adam and Eve saw their children and grandchildren, and in them they saw reflections of themselves. They felt the weight of their choices echoing through the generations. What had started with a decision in Eden now shaped the lives of every human being who would follow them. The pain and suffering they had known so well had become an inseparable part of human existence. Yet alongside this, there were also strength, perseverance, and the ability to love and create, even in the face of adversity. The vast and untamed world became the stage for their descendants to continue writing the story of humanity. Every choice Adam and Eve made, every step they took away from Eden, had repercussions that stretched far beyond their own lifetimes. Over time, they understood that their legacy wasn't solely one of sin and suffering. It was also a legacy of learning and redemption. Humanity, faced with the consequences of that first act of disobedience, discovered its ability to seek God, rebuild, repent, and find new ways to live in communion with the Creator. In his later years, Adam gazed toward the horizon, reflecting on Eden, the taste of the forbidden fruit, and the many decades of struggle and labor that followed. But amidst those memories, he also saw something more: the determination of his children to pursue goodness, the wisdom they gained by learning from their parents' mistakes, and the faith that, despite everything, still burned in their hearts. This was the legacy Adam left behind, a legacy of responsibility, an understanding of the consequences of one's choices, and the ability to seek what is good, even in a fallen world. Adam and Eve showed us that despite our flaws, there is always a path back to God, a way to learn, grow, and make a difference. It is in this ongoing cycle of fall and redemption that the true nature of humanity is revealed, not as perfect beings, but as beings capable of learning from mistakes, seeking goodness, and leaving a legacy filled with hope and faith for future generations. If you enjoyed Adam's story and want to continue exploring other powerful tales, make sure to like this video, share it with those you love, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on new content. Together, we will dive deeper into the invaluable lessons found in the Bible.